Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? It's another Sunday, a bit of a gloomy day here in Australia, but I think every Sunday is sort of becoming a a running theme now where I've been doing live streams, but it's been quite fun. So I just keep coming back to do it, especially engaging with people who are long-time viewers of the channel. But welcome everyone. Just getting started. We've got two very exciting segments planned for you today. Unfortunately, both are around the UK. Obviously, a lot of weird news coming out of the UK this week. But I'm very excited to get into that. Welcome. Thank you. Person whose name I cannot say. Yeah, this is an issue I've been facing. There are so many people whose names I just... Yeah, it's just a bunch of letters, and I can never really say it. But yeah, and after the two segments, we'll quickly go into Q&A as usual. And I think you were the person who asked me that question about whether the UK was going to become an Islamic country. I actually posted that clip around the discussion on the channel, so that was fantastic. That was really fun. Yeah, but we'll also do something similar at the end of the session today. Yeah, it was you, wasn't it? Yeah, that was great. So, as always, I'd like to start by thanking everyone for watching the streams, watching the normal videos, even the clips these days that I've started posting. Really grateful for your support. In fact, we're actually looking at maybe 500 more subscribers until the channel hits 100,000, which is fantastic because I've only really been doing this for under maybe a little bit over a year, and with the amount of videos to get to 100 has been fantastic. So as always, if you aren't subscribed already, please remember to subscribe, give the stream a like, and you can also participate in the discussion further by going into the Discord link. It's in the description. You can also support the channel by becoming a member on Patreon or on the YouTube channel itself. So let's get started. I've got a video here that I figured I would play for all the viewers if you haven't seen it already. It's from a rather newly elected MP in the UK for Reform. Her name's Sarah Pochin, and she was previously a Conservative councillor and magistrate. So, and only joined Reform in 2025. A few days ago, she asked the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, a question. Sort of took him by surprise, I would say. I'll just play the video and then we'll just get into a discussion around it, because I think they've spoken a little bit about Islam and women, especially in the last stream. There was a long discussion around it, and I think this ties in really nicely with it. So let's just have a quick play of this.
Given the Prime Minister's desire to strengthen strategic alignment with our European neighbours, will he, in the interest of public safety, follow the lead of France, Denmark, Belgium and others, and ban the burqa?
Prime Minister.
He did not expect that at all, did he?
Can I welcome her to our place? But I'm not going to follow her down that line. But now she is here and safely in her place, perhaps she could tell her new party leader that his latest plan to bet £80 billion of unfunded tax cuts, with no idea how he's going to pay for it, is Liz Truss all over again. Although, considering I think she was a Conservative member when Liz Truss was leader, she probably won't.
Yeah, that's the video. Yeah, so she's essentially come out and asked Keir Starmer if he would consider banning the burqa in the UK. No, it's not. I think the video sort of gives this impression this is some crazy question that's being asked, but it's not really, because the burqa is banned in a number of countries in Europe already. Some of the most major countries in Europe, I would say, actually got my trusted assistant GPT to look up these countries. So we've got France since 2011, Belgium, the Netherlands, Austria, Denmark, Switzerland, Bulgaria, Norway, Germany. Well, that's sort of a partial ban. Italy, local bans, Latvia, and there have been some discussions around banning it in other countries as well. So it's not entirely new at all. Welcome, Fish with Aquaphobia. Great name, by the way. Little cat feet and the rest. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Glad to have you on board. On top of this, I'm pretty sure the EU has actually made some commentary around banning it as well. Now, for those of you who might not know what the difference between the burqa and the hijab might be, let me quickly show you. Because I think the context here is pretty important. This is what you would call generally the burqa, or in some cases, I guess you would also call it the niqab. I think this is a good one. Yeah. So it's very similar, the burqa and the niqab, but generally, I think when people talk about the burqa a lot, it's mostly this that they're referring to, where the eyes aren't actually covered. Double A, which country are you from? 6 a.m. It's 10:30 here in Australia. With these comments, I mean, if you just have a look at what these women look like while wearing it, I have always maintained rather openly that what the burqa represents is oppression. It essentially represents misogyny, the highly patriarchal hierarchy within Islamic communities, whether they be in Western countries or, I mean, they're really open about it in Muslim majority countries. So I feel like that in itself shows you that the burqa is a symbol of oppression, and in any civilized Western nation where women are valued and you fight for equality between the sexes, I feel like it should not be a thing. Now, I can make some concessions for the hijab because I think a lot of women have, I mean, especially in Australia and places like Sydney, you see how the hijab has been somewhat modernized a little bit more, and they aren't as bad looking. I mean, some of them sort of look like this, kind of just looks like a scarf. But this is what I guess a lot of people refer to when they're trying to ban it. Obviously, going back to how this discussion went, I feel like in the UK, in Australia, when I was growing up, and whenever I saw how many years ago, maybe we're talking about 30 years ago, when I grew up in the Maldives under an authoritarian dictatorship regime, even over there, they followed what is called a version of Islam called the Sufism. So a bunch of hippies. This version of Islam is very pacified. The closest to what I would call a peaceful version of Islam. But as globalization happened, as more people went to get these sheikhs, they went to study in states like Pakistan or other areas of the Middle East, they brought back with them certain ideas that were very different from the traditional Sufi beliefs that people had. And these ideas were more aligned with a version of Islam that is called Wahhabism, which originated out of Saudi Arabia. Now, the whole idea around Wahhabism is to go back to what the original followers of Islam were like. So, you know, what Muhammad and his followers, how they lived like. They want to go back to that. There's absolutely no reformation, nothing like that. And that's what makes it so dangerous. And once that started to happen, I remember growing up as a child, maybe one old granny on an island would wear not just the niqab, but something, let's go back to this chart again, something more like this. I mean, it was really basic. You couldn't really even call it a proper burqa. And suddenly you went from that to literally everybody wearing either a hijab or the niqab. So growing up, even to me as a child, and even to a lot of family members, this was, the niqab here was a foreign concept. It was so foreign. But obviously, as I always say on this channel, Islam is a rather imperialist religion, despite what the modern left might have you believe. It's extremely good at just straight up erasing indigenous culture entirely, or forcing it to change to sort of fit the mold of more of an Arab Wahhabist type of culture. So, hello, I hate Lanky Box. Welcome. So that's what we're looking at. So when I see this, now that, you know, in Australia and even in the UK, when I see, let's just search by the actual name. When I see this in any civilized society, I find it really weird. I find it so foreign, and I find it to be against everything that generally most people living in the West stand for. So the right for women to essentially be themselves, because what this is, the argument I guess would be that this represents some sort of modesty, but do you really need to do all of this to be modest? This is more around how women were sort of treated really badly during the times of Muhammad. And funny enough, if you go back into the historical context around where this came from, Islamic women did not start off wearing any of this. In fact, later on, sex slaves, essentially, in Islamic communities, they weren't allowed to cover up like this. That's a fun fact for you. It was only Muslim women who were forced to do this. And it also came about, it wasn't enforced initially by Muhammad, but one of his close followers, who later became one of the rulers of the Islamic world, he was the one who essentially forced this upon Muhammad. And I feel like I should probably tell you the story around it, because it's quite funny. I'll get ChatGPT to write it up real quick. Let's see what it says. Yeah, there you see. So even his wives and other Muslim women were in the area of Medina where Islam originated from. They were able to live their lives without full face or body coverings. The requirement simply wasn't there. So I would say the head coverings, the hijab and the niqab and all of that, they were more Arab culture rather than Islamic, as well, as funny as that might sound today. But obviously these two things are quite synonymous now, if you ignore the Christians and Jews who came from the Middle East. Umar was one of the most conservative people around Muhammad, and he really hated the idea of, as you can read here, other men being able to see or speak freely with the Prophet's wives. I think he just was a bit of a misogynist. He really wanted to control women, Muslim women, and sort of have it so that they were treated like property. And so he pressured Muhammad multiple times, and Muhammad didn't really exactly go ahead with any of that until, I don't know if he's done this here. Where is it? No, hold on. I think ChatGPT has self-censored a little bit here. Let me force it to tell you the real bits. This is how it actually happened. Yeah. So Umar, one of Muhammad's closest followers, and one of the most conservative as well, he actually followed Muhammad's wives around at night when they were going to the bathroom, being the sick man he was. And this essentially pressured Muhammad to come up with these verses. I've always maintained that I felt like all these people did not believe anything that they actually were saying out to their followers. I strongly, to this day, feel like they were all atheists, or maybe even agnostics or pagan in a sense. But it was all about power, obviously. But he essentially did this, being a stalker around Muhammad's wives, and conveniently, soon after this happened, Muhammad came around and said, "Hey, God has given me some magical verses where Muslim women have to essentially cover up," and that's where the hijab verse actually comes from. So going back to this argument here, this whole concept is the hijab and the niqab, first of all, was also not originally a Muslim thing. It was something that later became a Muslim thing, and now something that is foreign to so many Islamic countries that were conquered or that converted through trade. Their indigenous cultures have essentially been erased and replaced with this. So this question, I think, is quite warranted, because he's the prime minister. He's a continent where it's already been banned in quite a number of countries because, number one, it poses safety issues, security issues, and number two, it really humiliates women. And it sort of brings back, I guess, all the progress a lot of Western nations have made in empowering women. So this question, to me, was really warranted. Unfortunately, Keir Starmer wouldn't have a bar if it
Follow her down that line. But
he simply just refused to talk about it at all. Now, after that, I wanted to just quickly have a look at this discussion here, because none of them really want to talk about this. They truly want to just sort of sideline the topic of what this head covering really means for women. And in this case, they invited some Muslim women to comment on Sarah's comments. Let's see.
Well, firstly, what's just been said is completely contradiction, because firstly, it was said in Iran that women are terrorized, okay? And here it's been said that for wearing the burqa, they are the terrorists. So which one is it?
Well, it can be both at the same time. I don't know what point she's trying to make. In Iran, there is morality police who would come and round women up and lock them away, or worse, if they aren't wearing the hijab. It's a huge issue there. And how does that change the fact that the hijab represents oppression anywhere else? The reason Iranian women are protesting and fighting for the right to not wear it is because it represents oppression. So this point, nonsense.
And secondly, when it comes to Sarah, talking as a female MP for the first time, where she could have really raised issues with regards to domestic violence that is really on the rise right now, when it comes to...
I wonder which communities it's rising in, and what religions in their holy books demand that men can actually beat up their wives.
Mental health in the women's prisons and so many other issues. She picks on the European far-right nationalists and wants to copy them in British, not secular government.
Are you saying that the electoral processes of France, Belgium, Netherlands, Denmark, Austria, Switzerland, Bulgaria, Germany, Italy, Latvia, Norway, you're all calling them far-right extremist nations?
Those have gone for the ballot. I've got the actual results here. All of them that called for the burqa was non-secularists. I mean, they were they were extremists. They were from the far right, like Gert Wilder, whatever his name is, and they were the ones that actually were calling for this. So it was those parties that Reform tries to say that they...
Hold on, just because there were right-wing parties who did so, doesn't make it wrong? I mean, think about it this way. Why would a left-wing party alienate their usually Muslims vote left-wing? Why would they alienate those electorates or those potential voters? They won't. The left absolutely will not talk about this because in their worldview, there's the oppressor versus the oppressed dichotomy in everything. So in this case, Islam, as I've discussed a few times, even on the channel, is seen as a religion of non-white people. So their culture and their beliefs are somewhat protected and high on the hierarchy of oppression compared to something else. So they're never going to criticize what the hijab or the burqa means. So if they're not going to do it, the other side, which is a right wing, obviously are going to do it. And just because they're right wing doesn't make it wrong. And she's saying it like it's a dirty word. It's really projection from her end. Yeah, I can't remember who said it. But there's a really funny joke, a little cat feed that you reminded me of, and it's something like, you know what? You should not judge Muslim women for wearing the hijab because it's not up to you; it's up to her husband. I can't remember who said that, but I'm pretty sure it was said in a rather public setting, and I found that quite funny. Is the echo on this? Don't know why.
Not racist, they're not nationalists, but they're following suit. And that is completely against British law. If the bishops, can sit in the House of Lords, why can't a woman wearing a niqab just go down to Sainsbury's and do her shopping? They're not the threat. They are not the ones that are causing terrorism, as some people like to misrepresent. If it's happening in another country, it is not the British law here. We are not secularism here, in a sense that we have certain rules for freedom of expression and freedom of religion.
I hear you. We also have a democracy where, to be frank, Sarah Potion can ask whatever she wants.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Little catfeed. It was Ricky who said that. Yeah, it's such a clever comment to make as well, because it immediately shuts people like this down, because no matter what they say, we know for a fact that it is not a choice, because it's extremely community enforced, and especially enforced by the males in Islamic families. I know this because I come from one. I know how much pressure there is from dads. Oh, thank you very much, L. I'll read that. It says, respect. It takes courage to expose Islam, especially as an apostate. Read Unholy Alliance, Muslims and Communists, and Introduction, Ben Folks and Bulan Gurkha. I hope I pronounced that correctly. You can find it on Google for free. Thank you very much for that donation, Al. And definitely, I think at the moment, I know a lot of people somewhat live in denial or they're blind to the facts, but this alliance, the Red-Green Alliance, as we call it, represents one of the biggest threats to Western civilization as of recent. It's really new, and people don't actually really even know how to deal with it. And I think the left are able to hide behind, as I said, Islam being a religion of non-white people, as they like to believe. They love to hide behind that and use cultural relativism to push the ideas behind Islam. And it's quite dangerous, because on the face of this, Islamic belief, the fundamentals of Islam stand against literally everything that a standard, typical Western democracy is built on. So, yeah, it's just unfortunate. Let's see what this lady has to say. And can I just say, she has a very annoying voice. It's hard to listen to. She's already come here and she looks really angry. She She can't speak in a calm way. All right, let's see what she says.
She can ask any question we want. You don't get to tell her what she asks. Nobody gets to tell her what she asks. She's a free...
that she's actually against Muslim women.
She did not say...
Actually, she's not against Muslim women. Look, I can't speak for Sarah, but here's what I can say. Anybody who speaks for the right for Muslim women to be able to shed their hijab and to be able to not wear it without pressure and without the stress of violence from their family or their community is a hero in my book. Like, you know, I always say my biggest wish is for as many Muslims to leave this religion as quickly as possible and join the real world. And I think a lot of it starts with women. And for a lot of them, this is not a choice. And for her to somewhat make it seem like giving them that choice, and in a lot of these countries, to be honest, the burqa is banned in certain public settings. It's not banned everywhere. But I feel like a ban sort of gives them the choice that they otherwise do not have. Because as I showed you in this diagram before, the burqa is probably the more extreme version of it. I mean, once again, we're coming back to sort of this. This is what I'm more referring to, because the Afghan type burqa is really not seen in a lot of Western countries. Maybe you have, but I can confidently say I've never seen this in Australia. Let me know if you have, because that I would find quite interesting. What I see usually is either this, where the face is somewhat visible, and the normal hijab. All right, where is this lady? What's she got to say?
By picking on a particular group, and at the end of it, she says she's a magistrate who would not in court actually represent or speak to someone who's wearing a burqa. Do you know that she could be actually called in breach of judicial impartiality and equality laws for even saying that? Does she not know the laws?
Fahima.
Yeah, because would a lawyer know who they're representing if you come dressed up like this? Like, couldn't this be a man? And I do know a lot of criminals, terrorists and otherwise, especially in the Middle East, they have gotten away with wearing disguises that look like but by hiding under a niqab, because no one can really tell. And yeah, exactly. It is, number one, if we put aside the whole, the religious aspect of it and even the misogynistic aspect of it, it represents a huge security concern, right? Because anyone can wear this, and look, if they wear this, it's where even the eyes are covered up. What the hell is that? Look at this. Oh my goodness, I don't think I've seen this before. This person looks like one of those, like she's wearing one of those gas masks from World War I. God, that is a scary image. Yeah. Yeah, kind of looks like this. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I've seen that before. That is a scary image. So if I have to see it, you have to see it as well. I have seen these ones before. Obviously very, very popular for in Afghanistan under the Taliban especially. But generally, I can confidently say this type of outfit I have not seen in Australia. I've not seen it growing up either. In one of the only apparently 100% Islamic countries in the world. So it's rather unique, and I really hope something like this does not come to Western countries, as cultural relativism becomes more popular, and people are like, oh, okay, that's not too bad. It's just their culture. So criticizing that is racism or whatever. That would be quite silly. Yeah. Resident Evil or Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've seen some of these in Baldur's Gate 3 recently as well. Any scary looking video game? Yeah, yeah, you probably would come across things like this. Welcome, RU486. Yeah, look, Mort, so it certainly has, and I think that is primarily why. Let me mute this before I play this again, because I can't stand her voice. That is primarily why people like this are able to immediately resort to the arguments that she made. So they're either resorting to, oh, why are you talking about this when other crimes against women are increasing? Or she's going to talk about, or look at, it's all racism, and she said she's not going to represent somebody who wears that. Actually, you know what? I'm sure Australian viewers have probably seen this, but oh, why am I logged out? But I don't know if you've seen this is an Australian senator, and she's been around for years. And she actually, to make this argument, she actually showed up to Senate wearing the burqa. Check this out. This is one of the most insane things I've seen.
Senators, order. Senators, I've been advised by the clerk via the attendant that the identity of Senator Hanson.
I'd happy to remove.
Oh, here we go.
That the identity of Senator Hanson was established before she entered the chamber. Senator Hanson.
Yeah, check this out.
I'm quite happy to remove this because this is not what should belong in this parliament. My question is
Order. Point of order, Senator Wong.
Waiting the question.
Thank you. Senator Hanson, your question.
to Senator Brandis, the Attorney General. Senator Brandis, in light of our national security...
Oh, Maud, I didn't do anything, actually.
Will you work with the... Will
Order
you
on
work
my,
to
on my
actually
left.
ban the burqa in Australia,
Order.
considering...
Just a moment, Senator Hanson. I need to hear the question. So can I have some order on my left and my right? Senator Hanson, would you commence your question again, please?
In light of what is happening with there has been 13 foiled national threats against us with terrorism, 3 that have been successful, and Australians have lost their lives. Terrorism is a true threat to our country. Many
They really hated this. It's pretty... It's still pretty funny that this actually happened.
The Australian people, considering there has been a large majority of Australians wish to see the banning of the burqa.
Yeah, look, that actually reminds me. There have been polls done around banning the burqa in the UK, and every single time, people have actually said they would support one. So let me see if I can get a link for it to show you. In the UK, there's a Wikipedia article that actually has got it. Where is it? Oh, here we go. Yeah, so in 2010, 15 years ago, but still, it found 67% of people supported a complete ban on wearing it across Britain. And 10 years ago, roughly 10 years ago, almost 60% favoured it again. Obviously, the drop is coming as you can see. You know, there's been a lot more migration into the UK since 2015. But 60% is still quite significant. So a few years later, again, we're still looking at 60% supporting a burqa ban. I reckon, even today, even with all the cultural relativism and the political correctness that infests the community at large, most people would still agree with banning it. Because I think, number one, since these polls were taken, there's been a few security issues and a few terrorist attacks across the West, across Europe especially. So I think at least, I hope, I'm just making the assumption here, at least some people within the left should see this as a security concern, especially when it comes to public spaces. Now, this, I reckon, would also mirror back in Australia, where a lot of people would think that a public ban on the burqa is necessary, and they would support it. I bet you it's going to be something like 60%. So, Sarah isn't actually the first person who's done this. This Australian senator, almost 10 years ago, did the exact same thing, but with a bit of dramatic effect as well. And she's still a senator, and I believe her party has actually won more seats than they ever have in the upper house in the past election. Because while the major conservative party somewhat failed for a lot of Australians, the votes from them sort of went to this other niche right-wing party, is what I would call them. There's been a few more comments made by her around this. Let's see what she said.
The burqa is a profoundly misogynistic item, in my view, and very offensive to our British culture.
Yeah, that's what I said as well. I feel like it is, on top of being a security issue and on top of it being misogynistic, I find it quite offensive because it stands against everything a lot of women fought really hard for, including things like the right to vote, the right to own property. All of this, it's just such a shame then to see a human being's form being so offensive. And the modesty argument is essentially men can't control themselves, whatever. That shouldn't even be a thing. Like, any person with an average IQ even should be able to just completely disregard that argument, because you're saying because men cannot control themselves, women have to dehumanize themselves. That doesn't make any sense. Why don't men be better in that case? So, you know what? Funny enough, when you contextualize it, we're talking about Muslim men. Why don't they be better? Why do they have to essentially lose all their morality and become wild animals, or however they're trying to phrase this, at the side of a woman? Why don't they be better so that women can live normally like a human being?
Keir Starmer himself in the last week has talked about this country being an island of strangers. Well, there's no better way to start to change that than to get rid of such items like a burqa, which is so distinctive and so divisive, and actually quite a threatening thing for British people to pass on the streets, or for children to have to come across in school, or whatever area of life it might be. I was a magistrate for 20 years, Kevin. If anybody had walked into my courts wearing such an item, proceedings would have been stopped until the item was removed.
That must have been what she was referring to before, and I completely agree with that. I think that comment that Keir Starmer made around this was one of the most significant lines spoken by anyone in power in the UK around the whole immigration issue and the changing of culture in Britain. Although, ironically enough, that they've just come out and said talking about these issues is terrorism. We'll get to that in a second. But after having said this, which is quite significant in my opinion, where you're on track to essentially not even recognize who you are as a country anymore, are we really going back and just saying, I'm not going to follow you down that line? Let's have a quick look at a few images of what this might look like. Like, is this really what a person like Keir Starmer would find acceptable in a great city like London? I certainly wouldn't find it acceptable. And even today, when I see things like this, well, not exactly the Afghan version of burqa, but women in niqabs, like looking like this, I just find it so offensive. I find it absurd almost. And I just know that these women are silently suffering. So I'm genuinely curious as to, would Keir Starmer have a look, like find something like this acceptable in a major Western country? And let's just assume that these are born and bred British citizens. They aren't immigrants, but they belong to certain enclaves. And how could you, as someone who was born in Britain and who understands its culture and its history, I would think, find it acceptable? It's not. It's extremely foreign, and it dehumanizes your own people. Yeah, look, I am also completely for cultural clothing. And, you know, I think it speaks to the human story, which I find quite fantastic if you're looking at the good sides and the cultures and the traditions that have come out of the human story over the past few thousand years. However, this, unfortunately, I would say, is probably one of the negative, one of the more negative outfits that came out of this story. And there's another image. I've used this in some of my videos before, but I think this would be really cool. What is it? Let's see if that image comes up. It's not. Maybe it's because... Let's see if it's on Reddit. Nope. Maybe on X. It just sort of shows you, this image that I'm looking for shows you essentially. Ed, thank you very much for joining Patreon. Really happy to have you on board. Thank you very much for that. Where is it? Can't find it, unfortunately. Oh, here it is. Perfect. Have a look at this image. This is, if I can zoom in a little bit, just have a quick look at that. This is erasing the traditional cultural dresses of all these countries. And it really does dehumanize these women on the right here. It makes them no different to anybody else in any other country. So it's absurd. Yeah, it's a great photo. I think this is an image that Keir Starmer probably should see, because is he going to then go ahead and be like, all right, this is acceptable, and this is the line that he's not going down, where women from, obviously the UK has somewhat become a bit of a melting pot where a lot of people from different cultures have arrived, and some have assimilated quite well as well. But is he going to be fine then, where if there is conversions or whatever happening, that all of that gets erased and people just started dressing up like this? Surely not. Yeah, let me post that for you. I feel like any rational person would absolutely not find this acceptable. And any rational person, even if you're not secular, even if you're a believer in any other religion, you would find this rather offensive. And you would find it quite sad that these women have to live through this. And that is why I actually saved this video here. Just have a... Now, Tajikistan is one of the few countries that actually stands alone in this regard. It's a Muslim majority country, but they have banned those types of outfits, the burqa and all of that, because they want to preserve their actual cultural heritage. Have a look at it. Oh. And I think, let me just, when you see videos like this, remember this fact, and it's a really sad one as well. There's been a number of cultures, traditions, music, dance, singing, that's been absolutely erased. And it's just part of the past now, where not just erased, where it's been memory hold, where in a few of these countries, where their indigenous cultures, traditions, and even names are seen as something really bad. I know this for a fact that in the Maldives, like people, I don't think any of the newer generations have indigenous names anymore. They're all named in with Arabic names now, which is quite sad, because I think, if I think about it, perhaps my great grandparents might probably have had indigenous names, somewhat becoming a bit of a merge. They somewhat merged with Arabic names, but still held on to that indigenous part, and a lot of people just refer to them with their indigenous names. So it's insane to me that more Islamic countries don't actually go ahead and do this, because, and thank you very much for subscribing to Patreon. Glad to have you on board. And a lot of these countries, unfortunately, what they don't realize is once these traditions are replaced with Islamic or Arab cultural traditions, which are quite synonymous these days, they're not coming back. The memory hold, they're never coming back. It's going to be so hard, because your culture has now been replaced with something that you truly believe explains the meaning of the universe, right? Armchair. Yeah, that's the name. Sorry, I missed the name last time, but Armchair, thank you very much for becoming a member. Glad to have you on board. Let's read this comment. My mother was a belly dancer. Mort, thank you very much for joining as well. Glad to have you on board. I know you've been watching a few of these streams, so yeah, glad to have you. And I had to explain to her that so much of what makes Muslim culture so great was really the underlying culture it appropriated, not because, yeah, that is correct. And yeah, I think they really might be one of the few countries that have done this. Maybe I can get GPT to explain why, because I haven't really looked into this very much. Yeah, I have seen belly dancing even here, and I think a few Muslim communities still somewhat engage with it. I feel like, I mean, I can't say this for a fact, but Lebanese, Iranians, yeah, I think they've primarily been the driving force behind some of that. In Australia, I can't really speak for other countries. Yeah, and it's crazy because they are mostly Sunni Muslims as well. But I guess perhaps it's the post-Soviet influence that's doing it, because communism generally it's not a big fan of certain religions, which you can currently see in China, where I believe they consider Islam a mental illness. I mean, I might be wrong here, but I think that's the excuse they use to do some really nasty things there. Yeah, it seems like they have really. Oh God, I can't believe they actually do this. A law bans people under 18 from attending mosques. That is insane. Okay, so you can't wear the hijab in schools and government buildings. Women in public sector jobs are encouraged to wear non-Islamic attire. And even fasting has been discouraged or monitored for public servants, essentially. So fear of Islamic extremism, agreed, because it's always a slippery slope. Once you start a little bit, then it just snowballs into something really bad, which is what happened in the Maldives, for example. Authoritarian control, yeah, that's what I was initially thinking as well. Post-Soviets, yeah, that's probably why, and the communist Soviet legacy, I guess. National identity, cultural nationalism centered on pre-Islamic Persian heritage. Yeah, this dress kind of reminded me. I don't know if anyone in the chat is of Persian or Iranian heritage, but it did immediately remind me of that. There's a bit of resemblance there. I feel like with their clothing. Yeah. Funny enough, it was similar to this when I grew up in the Maldives. Like, because it was a dictatorship, an authoritarian dictatorship that was one of the longest lasting ones in Asia, they did something similar. So the president at the time, what he did was he essentially suppressed a lot of non-secular thought. Now, there was a version of Islam that was practiced, but they understood that if they were to ensure that their tourism industry was to grow and bring in those nice dollars, as I always like to say, the mighty dollar usually always trumps Allah when it comes to it. But in order to do that, they really suppressed, often violently, the more extreme sheikhs and that. And it was only after and we have seen this in many countries, especially with the number of Arab states, even Egypt, where when the Arab Spring happened, a lot of the countries that were formerly ruled by dictators, whether it be Gaddafi or whoever, when they fell, they got replaced by even more extreme ideologues. And I think you certainly see it essentially becoming, or eventually becoming, I guess after Saddam fell, ISIS sort of, actually I hope that didn't trigger something from YouTube, but that organization that starts with an I, they sort of came along, and that's because previously, a lot of these dictators, they realized in order to protect their authoritarian rule, one thing that they always need to suppress is religious extremism. And across a number of Islamic countries, they've done so. And I guess, look, you might say, on paper, you might be able to say, look, this is part of an authoritarian regime doing this, or a totalitarian regime doing this. But if the end result is that their traditional music, their traditional attire, all of that gets protected, and women can be free to be able to celebrate their own Indigenous heritage, what really is the problem? I don't see that as a problem at all. And I think this will be one of the few countries who are able to hold on to that, unlike quite a number of Islamic nations that have just, as you can see in this image here, that have just entirely lost what it means to be connected to your Indigenous heritage. I mean, if you take out the labels, you couldn't tell who was from which country. Like, how could you? They all look the same. They're all hidden away. They have all been dehumanized. Well, to be fair, I think perhaps you can tell by the eyes which region they might come from. That's beside the point. And yeah, Bella, I mean, I haven't really I hadn't come to the conclusion that it would be on every Sunday, but I think we're sort of getting into this really nice groove where Sunday mornings, Australia time, they've become when I do live streams. So it's probably going to be around this time next week and every week after. I think I'm settling into that. But glad to have you on board. Let's see. Yeah, so coming back to this essentially argument around the burqa ban in the UK. If you don't do it, that's the end goal here. Where if one part, actually, is that Adnan Hussein? Look at his face as she asked that question. He must be so mad. Look at him. Can I zoom in? If you don't know who he is, he's one of the Gaza independents. I actually did a video on him recently. That's been seen by quite a number of people. It's he's the person who was talking about essentially quasi blasphemy laws in the UK, and I think he'll be part of the group that's going to try and put that on paper. Speaking of which, blasphemy is what I've got planned next in the next segment to talk about. And people from Australia, well, the Maldives sort of, I guess the indigenous part of it was sailors from all around the world, essentially just getting shipwrecked on these islands, and just became a mesh of different people and culture. So Maldivians would never consider themselves ethnically anything apart from Maldivian because of that. And it's got its own distinct language, its own distinct form of writing, alphabets. Obviously, a lot of influence from the Arabs as well. Once Islam came about through trade, initially it wasn't conquered or anything like that, but that was initially through trade. Bella, and this is a question I think I should probably answer more often. The best way to support it is honestly Patreon. Thank you, Morton. God, I honestly can't say your name. But Morton, let's stick to your first name. Thank you very much for that donation on Patreon. Usually the best place is actually to just support me via Patreon rather than YouTube itself, because YouTube unfortunately takes quite a cut. So Patreon's certainly the best place. And all the videos that I post either uncensored versions or early releases on Patreon way before it actually goes live. So a lot of the time, sometimes I have to cross my fingers and hope that YouTube approves some of these videos. And if they don't, then I have to go through these cycles of arguing with them as to why they don't they actually go with the guidelines. But before any of that, Patreon, you'll be able to see those videos. But thank you very much for that again. The UK is in trouble now for their British Council operating as an NGO. Yeah, look, I feel like in any other European country, even in Australia, I feel like this would not have been that controversial because the UK, I believe, has like 4 million Muslims now, and they have organized into very effective voter blocks. So now an argument like this becomes significantly harder. So let's now, speaking of blasphemy, this is the other issue. A lot of people still to this day deny that blasphemy laws exist in the UK, and on paper they don't, but reality is they have in fact come to the UK, but not necessarily calling itself blasphemy. They always use very devious ways to prosecute blasphemy, and mind you, that blasphemy is always Islamic. It's never Christian blasphemy or Jewish blasphemy or Hindu or Buddhist blasphemy. It's always Islamic blasphemy they prosecute for. So how did this come about? I will share with you an article. Let's start with The Guardian, actually. After The Guardian, we'll go into the Free Press, where Hamid Koskin, he has actually written an article explaining why he did what he did. But the UK is currently prosecuting this gentleman. He's a Kurdish and Armenian. He has Kurdish and Armenian heritage, and he's an atheist. So what he's essentially done is gone outside the Turkish embassy on the 13th of February, or for the Turkish consulate, and he has burnt a Quran, and he was shouting a number of slogans, which he claims was done so to bring attention to the Islamic extremism that is growing in Turkey. Now, I think we all know how Turkey has treated the Kurds and even Armenians in the past. We don't need to talk about that anymore, but it's never been really good. So you can understand why someone like this would sort of resort to a stunt like this to garner support and attention. Now, the story actually gets crazier because of how he was charged. While he was doing all of this in front of the embassy, he actually got attacked by a bunch of Muslims. And the prosecutors are, and I believe the judge as well, they're using the fact that he was attacked as causing a public order offense. Because he's the victim of physical violence, that means he has caused disorder within the public, and that's why he's getting prosecuted, which is the lengths to which they have to go through to prosecute Islamic blasphemy is genuinely insane. Yeah, look, Jess, I generally don't really go into The Guardian because they're extreme. You are right. They lean left. But in this case, I'm just somewhat providing a context as to what the story is. As I said, we'll go into what this gentleman himself has actually said, because he wrote an article for the Free Press. Yeah, as usual, while he was getting prosecuted, they're saying he's not being prosecuted simply for the burning of the Quran. Well, that obviously makes part of it, but for disorderly conduct. The disorderly conduct is how people who generally do these public demonstrations, or usually they involve the burning of the Quran, but whether it be slogans or even sort of anti-dawah, as you could call it, they all get prosecuted under this particular concept of disorderly conduct, which is pretty crazy to me. Goa, thank you very much for joining from Chile. I didn't even realize there were Chilean viewers of my channel, but I actually know a few people from Chile. I actually learned Spanish alongside a Chilean teacher as well, but I've forgotten now. Just a basic unit at uni where I chose Spanish. Okay, so now let's go to the actual article that he's written. The title is, "I burnt a Quran. The British government punished me for blasphemy." I can somewhat understand Hamid. You know why? Because being really young, I moved to the West, and I was determined, because I saw the end result of... Yeah, Christine, you're right. Yeah, you see how hypocritical all of this is. So for a lot of ex-Muslims, or even people fleeing Islamic countries, whether they be Christians or Kurds or whoever, the crazy thing really is that they flee these countries, and in their new host countries, mostly in the West, they want to make sure that those countries don't turn into what they fled from, right? And I think Hamid is would easily be one of them. And I would certainly consider myself as one of them as well, because I see what the end or the end result looks like. And I don't want that to happen to Australia or any part of the Commonwealth or even the US. While they have a number of safeguards, even then, it's never guaranteed unless you actively do something. Trying to get a video with Avi and Rukshan. You know what? I actually reached out to Avi. I've actually met him in person previously as well. But I haven't got a response, but would always love to collaborate with Australian YouTubers. So, again, he set fire, and Koskin, an atheist who fled persecution from the Turkish authorities in 2022, was there to protest Islamic extremism in his home country. For this act, he was assaulted and knocked to the ground by a bystander, kicked by another passerby, and charged with a religiously aggravated public order offence by the Crown Prosecution Service. Well, in other words, let's just put the BS aside. Prosecuted for blasphemy. At his sentencing, a UK district judge told Koskin that his protest was provocative, concluding that he had been driven by a deep-seated hatred of Islam and its followers. But that's not what he did, though, is it? So if you burn the Quran, or if the South Park creators make an episode about Muhammad, or Charlie Hebdo draws Muhammad, is that being satirical and criticizing religion or its followers? I think we have to really make that distinction here as well. Because I strongly feel like they know there's a distinction, but the only way to really get you is by saying, oh, but you're saying all that hateful, this is all hate speech against a certain group of people. But it's not really speech against people. It's always directed towards dogma. Now, conversely, imagine this had happened to Christianity. This would not be an article, I can guarantee you that. People make fun of Jesus. They dress up like Jesus for Halloween. I mean, I don't know if people burn the Bible as much as the Quran, because perhaps it's not seen in a similar way. But it's so easy to make fun of Christianity on mainstream media, on social media platforms, and no one's ever going to say anything. You're never going to get prosecuted by Keir Starmer for blasphemy for it. You're never going to get prosecuted by Anthony Albanese in Australia for it. All of that happens primarily when it's Islam. And the reason is, as I said before, the modern left has really convinced the mainstream that even when it comes to religion and religious beliefs, there is this dynamic of oppressor and oppressed historically. So in their case, Islam generally has been a non-white religion. So it's okay for you to suddenly prosecute people for saying anything bad about it, because they conflate that with saying something bad about people. That's always been their game plan, and they execute it perfectly every single time. Now, this is a really great point that Hamid has made. He's saying that some may say that book burning is a poor substitute for reasoned debate, and he says that, however, he felt like it was a symbolic, non-violent form of expression intended to draw attention to the ongoing move from the secularism of my country of birth to a regime that embraces hardline Islam. And to be completely fair to him as well, he's actually doing this as a political protest against the Turkish government. He was in front of the Turkish embassy here. But they've completely disregarded that as well. They're not focusing on that at all. They're focusing on the religious aspect of it. Which is again, that's their game plan. However, the judge obviously ruled otherwise. And the reasoning deployed to convict me raises troubling questions about whether Britain is witnessing the quiet return of blasphemy laws. Well, unfortunately, this no longer, in my opinion, is a question. It has returned. because if it hadn't, then Hamid here would not have been prosecuted. There was another gentleman who was arrested recently. He also went to burn the Quran in Manchester, and he was protesting the killing of Salwan Momika, the Swedish asylum seeker. Let's see. This is the point I was making before. Although the man who assaulted me is being prosecuted separately, the Crown says his action helped to prove my guilt. It argued that because I was attacked, oh God, this is hard to read, honestly. It's argued that because I was attacked, my behavior must not have been peaceful. Under this logic, disorderly no longer depends on conduct, but on how offended or how aggressive someone else chooses to be in response. So they're also setting the precedent, aren't they? So in this case, they're just making it harder and harder day by day to critique a religion. Well, one in particular. And that's the slippery slope we're going down. In the UK, it's accelerated. I always say, when it comes to Australia and Canada, if you want to look at a future point that you don't want to head towards, always look at the UK currently, because that's where the blasphemy laws are being actually implemented, like in this case. And that's where enclaves have become really powerful and actually have really gained power in Parliament now. And that's why they have just utterly and completely failed when it comes to immigration, integration, and propaganda around cultural relativism. It's just absurd. So if for the Australian and Canadian viewers, I think it might be quite late in the UK at the moment, but this is the path that these countries should try their best not to go down. Unfortunately, there's always similarities, especially when the left come into power across these three nations. Yeah, and here it is again, that key point. This lies at the heart of the matter and is key to the danger of the precedent set. If every protest against Islam is presumed to be a protest against Muslims, if criticism of doctrine is redefined as hatred of believers, then space for lawful criticism of that religion or any religion collapses. My case turned on that blurring of categories. Yeah. And I've certainly said, why are we not allowed to? Yeah, you're not. And unfortunately that's the heart of the problem. And like I said again, this wasn't, if you look deeper into what Hamid is saying, his primary issue, because he's only come to the UK 3 years ago, his primary issue is around Turkey, about how Turkey is going down that path of extremism instead of secularism. And that's why he went to the Turkish embassy. He's not doing this in front of a mosque. He's doing it in front of the Turkish consulate, because it's a political protest. And of course, he's burnt the Quran to draw attention to it. But it's a multifaceted issue here where the government is using multiple ways to number one, ensure that a protest like this could not happen again. And number two, it's now set the precedent that you cannot really criticize a religion without saying it's a critique of the people who follow it, which is a very dangerous line to go down. And now, obviously, he talks a little bit about his background, his parents' background, but I think this part is important, where he says, the Turkey I had grown up in was disappearing. Erdogan's rise to power brought with it a new political theology. Islamist groups were tolerated, even encouraged. The education system was transformed, science and evolution pushed aside, religious dogma promoted, children funneled into Quran schools and religious orders. I saw reports of senior figures from Hamas visiting Turkey, welcomed, protected, housed in government buildings. Police officers no longer served the law but the faith. I was detained again, and a plainclothes officer told me that if I returned to prison, I would not come out alive. There was something about the way he put a gun to my head and as he spoke that made me believe him. After that, the decision to claim asylum in Britain made itself. Why the UK? Because I believed it was a country where an atheist refugee could speak without fear. That belief brought me to the gates of the Turkish consulate on February 13. Had I known that challenging the Islamist propaganda that destroyed the country I grew up in could lead to prosecution, I might have thought twice about coming to Britain. But I'm here now, and I will not remain silent. God, that's a tough read, to be completely honest with you. I think for a lot of people in countries like this, in Islamic countries, ex-Muslims, prosecuted minority Christians, and people of other faiths, I don't think they truly understand how bad it has become in a number of countries like the UK, where laws like this, precedents like this are being set, where it's significantly harder for you to actually escape those countries, come to these and then say, hey, look, I struggled with the Islamization of my country. This is how people were treated. They can't speak about that anymore because, well, unfortunately, cultural relativism and political correctness has just taken over in a really bad way. And I think this takes me to the next bit that I wanted to show you guys. Prevent, which is a UK program that was initially set up to ensure that young Muslim kids do not become brainwashed by extremist ideology, radical Islam, where they then end up growing up to become terrorists. It has been redefined to include a lot of right-wing ideas as well. But as you all know, when people say right-wing these days, or fascist or totalitarian or whatever, it's essentially just whatever they don't like, especially if you're talking from a left-wing point of view. But this has really caught the attention of a lot of people, where they have redefined extreme right-wing terrorism. And part of it, that new definition includes people who believe that Western culture is under threat from mass migration and a lack of integration by certain ethnic and cultural groups. Yeah. So in the UK, officially, if you believe that Western culture is under threat from mass migration and a lack of integration by certain groups, they consider that terrorism. I really... you almost think this is a parody, like a right-wing comic book writer or an artist has drawn up a comic strip, and this is what appears, or an article from the Babylon Bee. It's just absurd. It's unbelievable. Yeah, correct. He would have. So now in the UK, think about it, blasphemy is absolutely here. If you look at this gentleman's case, and now you can't even criticize and taking apart the religious side of it, mass migration is a political issue, yeah? Because it's a political decision made by the government. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. A bunch of people get together in a room and they decide, okay, for this year, this is the acceptable number of people who can come in. These are the requirements. And that's how you go about it. But that becoming something massive and going out of control, how is criticizing that and its negative effects terrorism? It shouldn't be. And it's not. At the moment, what they're trying to do is essentially stifle your freedom of expression. And obviously Labor is in power now, but they have seen the results in local elections where reform have really gained a lot of traction. And for both Labour and the Tories in the UK, I feel like this issue, they can try to ignore it as much as possible. They can try to avoid talking about it, but it's never going to go away. In fact, because it's not being dealt with in a reasonable fashion by the Tories, a lot of Conservatives essentially left them behind and went to reform. And it's now become an existential threat for them. And you can see this in Canada as well. A lot of young people are moving to the right. Their most recent election, the Conservatives lost because of boomers. Obviously, they've gotten it all, and they're happy to pull the ladder up behind them because they've got the houses, they've got the wealth, they've done everything they wanted. And for a lot of these people, they figure, okay, I won't be here in 20, 30 years, so I don't really care. And it's the young people who are left holding the bag. So in this case, even in Canada, it's now become an existential threat to the mainstream parties. It's an issue that they need to contend with, that they need to face head on. And it's an issue that they need to come to the conclusion of, well, whatever we have been doing in the past, it's not worked out. And a lot of people are catching up to the fact that that slight increase in GDP every year, that's just not going to cut it when everything around you is essentially changing. And people, even the most reasonable left-wing people, they're going to ask, and I think they should ask this question of, what does it mean to be British or Canadian or Australian? And this is a topic I covered in that video about post-nationalism. They have to come, there is a point they'll come to where they will have to ask this question. Because if there is no such thing, then okay. Just if 10 million people from, I don't know, Afghanistan come over, surely that's not a problem, is it? Like, why is that a problem? If it is a problem, and if perhaps you're not right-wing, and if you still find that to be a problem, then you need to be able to define what that problem is. And that's where you go down the path of, okay, all these countries, all these nation states, they're built on certain values, culture, language, and if that's no longer there, and all of that's been built over hundreds, if not thousands of years, yeah? And if that's not there anymore, then you don't represent anything. You're just a plot of land or an island or whatever it is that you are, and there's a government that essentially acts as just a service provider. It doesn't do anything beyond that. And that's the sad part. So in this case, I think what they're trying to really do is they've seen how popular reform is getting. Let me have a look at these results. Look at that. Christian Kevin, glad to have you on board. Thanks for subscribing. Hope you're enjoying the live streams and all the other videos so far. Now have a look at, is there a better chart? Yeah, this is a fantastic chart here. Hopefully everyone can see it. Look at that. Reform is a minor party. They weren't mainstream before. And you know what? A lot of people would have essentially thought, okay, it wasn't a party that was taken very seriously, is all I can say. But look at that. They've won so many seats. They've won almost 700 seats. While the Conservatives have essentially all those seats came from the Conservatives. Labor has lost and the Conservatives have lost. This is an insane result for them. And perhaps a sign that the aversion window is shifting and more people are coming to the same realizations that would have been considered far right back in the day. And I think even in the mainstream, despite what that lady that I showed you previously, this person here said, and even she was trying to make the same argument, despite all of that, what looks to me, what appears to be happening is normal, reasonable people are coming to the conclusion that something is really wrong and something better change before you reach an inflection point where it is then impossible to go back. Cave Beast, thank you very much for the dollar donation. Yeah, look, on the face of it, I think even to not really with left-wing parties, I don't want to assume that I know their intentions, especially many decades ago, but even with a lot of them, I think a lot of these parties had good intentions initially, but they were perhaps a bit too blind. When it came to multiculturalism, like if you were talking about Australia, obviously there was a period in time where Australia had the White Australia policy, where there were protectionist measures put in place to ensure that, especially I believe Chinese immigrants weren't able to work here. But after that, Australia took in a large number of Vietnamese immigrants who were fleeing the war. Australia has it's taken a large number of Italian, Greek immigrants. It's taken in a lot of Jewish immigrants after the Holocaust. So it's taken in a lot of people, and it generally, I guess, worked out quite well, because at the end of the day, a lot of these people believed in they were European. A lot of these people were Christian. So when they talked about multiculturalism, yeah, Jess Pixie, I did did you see my video on that? That's the one I did on post-nationalism, where, yeah, I came across that comment made by Trudeau as well, and I was like, holy crap, did he actually say that? And has this been, do people actually know that he's said this? Because that was 10 years ago. And 10 years later, everything that he's said that they would do is coming true. And I was like, crap, I've got to make a video about this. There's actually another video I'm working on right now that, I think it was probably mine. There's another video that I'm working on that I believe is going to blow your mind. It's actually worse than the blasphemy case here. I can't remember how I even came across it, but the level of infiltration of the UK's Home Office by Islamist networks, you would not believe. I'm hoping to put that video out. Hopefully, I'll see if I have some time today or tomorrow to just get a little bit of work done. But if I can do it, hopefully by tomorrow, I'll be able to release it. It will genuinely blow your mind. Certainly one of the craziest stories I think I've ever covered on this channel so far. But yeah, going back to what the UK is doing, this is a sign. It's with the Conservatives, they know now that the same line of thinking is not going to work out. People don't believe them, because after Brexit, the numbers just quadrupled, and we're looking at mostly non-European immigration into the UK now, and that's not what people voted for, is it? So, because Reform has won, and I think they'll win even more seats in the next election, and that's why they've come around with ideas like this, because a lot of what Reform talks about is essentially, the failures when it comes to government policies with immigration, the failures around integration. And a lot of people do still to this day think that integration is something you don't have to do proactively. It's something that just happens. That is not true at all. If I have to explain this in a simple manner, Brian, thank you very much for subscribing. Welcome to the channel. If you've been a follower already of some of my videos, hope you enjoy the live stream. So how it works is essentially people move to a country. Generally, if that group is small enough, they're sort of they sort of assimilate over time because they're surrounded by the more mainstream dominant culture. So in this case, it could be British, Australian, Canadian, whatever it might be. It happens more naturally. However, what happens here is because there's mass immigration, say there's a person from, as a great example for the UK, it would be Pakistan. Say there's a person from Pakistan who wants to move to the UK. They realize there's multiple there are multiple enclaves in the UK already, whether it be Bradford or Birmingham or whatever it might be. So they can just pack up, move to those cities or towns, and what's really changed for them? Everybody around them is speaking the same language. Everybody follows the same religion. Even the shops around them look the same. The people around them are the same. Nothing's really changed apart from the label of the country, really. And perhaps the weather. It's a lot colder. Nothing else has changed. So in this case, what they find themselves in, the dominant culture in that case is the exact same as the place they left. So that integration that used to happen more naturally no longer happens. In this case, governments, I strongly feel like should do more to ensure that integration, that assimilation happens. You have to, like, learning the host nation's language, its customs, its cultures, the respect for women, respect for people of other faiths, the concept of secularism, the concept of freedom of expression and the freedom of religion. All these concepts suddenly become things that you need to teach people. If it's not taught and the dominant culture is no different to the country you came from, unfortunately, nothing's going to change. So I guess that's where the major problem is. And apparently, the thing that I've just talked about for the past minute, according to this new prevent definition of extreme right-wing ideology, that is what I've just said to everyone here is apparently terrorism, according to this program. I guess I can safely say I'm glad I'm not in the UK right now. If this is the type of law, and if this is the type of belief that the elected government holds at the moment, I can't. There's nothing more I can say other than it's nothing but just straight up insanity. And people should be very, very concerned. And I hope that Reform or any other parties that are trying to push back against this are quite successful. Because if they aren't, then they're going to pass more laws like this. They're going to do it by stealth or however other means that they do it. And they're going to make it even harder to run on platforms like that. You have already seen that, I believe, in Germany, where they are trying to take down opposing right-wing parties through the court system. All right. Now, look, Canada, to Canada's benefit, I have seen a few good signs. Number one, I think the youth vote is quite different to Australia. It's the boomer vote that's more significant there. I think the youth vote is showing certain trends towards conservatives because at the end of the day, it is young people who can't afford homes. It is young people who would have to compete with more candidates for jobs. And if you add in AI to the mix, lots of reports coming out that say it is entry-level jobs that are going to get harder because AI is going to do all of that. And entry-level jobs in the past, it's been how young people essentially got their foot through the door to start their careers. So in this case, if even that becomes harder, like what are we looking at here for the next generation? It's quite bleak. So the left's been in power for what, like the past 10 years, and things they're not worked out really well. And it's only worked out for the boomers and people who essentially hoard property, and large corporations. The large corporations, they get cheap labor. They get more customers for their products. For people who own multiple homes, they get more renters, more profits or through selling these houses. These people benefit. Nobody else does. And the same story applies to Australia, although in Australia's case, it was the Conservatives in power for the past, it's now been 3 years since the left came into power, but before that, the Conservatives were in power for a good decade, and things got just worse. And you could it's almost interchangeable what the Conservatives in Australia did with what the left did in Canada, as funny as that sounds. But the end result was the same, because when you go back to that video, Jess, around the post-nationalism theory that Trudeau was talking about, that was the end result 10 years later. So in this case, I think Australia will go through a few years. I have predicted maybe 2 more terms of a left-wing government, at least. But Canada, I feel like the Conservatives are likely to be able to regain government, because it's not getting any better, and I don't think Mark Carney is going to make anything better. I mean, switching him up for Justin Trudeau, whose brand's been just tarnished quite badly, it was a smart move on their part, I would think. But apart from that, and also I do think if it weren't for Trump, they would have won this time easily. No doubt in my mind, they would have won. I think Trump threw in a bit of a wrench in all their plans, and it was a curveball that nobody could have predicted. And the left really capitalized on the whole, the Conservatives, they'll appease Trump and they'll do whatever he wants. Look at us. We're actually funny enough, suddenly nationalism became a good thing in their case. It was left-wing nationalism, so suddenly it was a good thing. And they were like, look at how patriotic we are. We're the ones actually representing Canada's interests, whereas the Conservatives have become globalists. and they're going to try and appease Donald Trump, whereas look at us. We're actually the nationalistic patriots, and we're the ones who are actually going to look out for you. Although that wasn't the case for the past 10 years. But yeah, that I think will change. I don't think Mark Carney and I don't think the Liberals will be able to rely on the Trump factor, if you could call it that, next time. And hopefully we can look towards a few years of Conservative rule, and hopefully making things a little bit better. Okay, let's see. I think we'll try to do a session. Those were the segments that I wanted to cover today. Now you get to see a nice close-up of my face. Funny enough, when I posted a clip from the last Q&A, obviously not everybody. So the clips I post on the channel primarily for subscribers and people who are familiar with my content, because obviously not everybody is going to see the live stream, so it's primarily for their benefit. But obviously YouTube doesn't work like that, so a lot of non-subscribers also see the clips, and they're like, what is up with that mask? It's so absurd. I mean, I wish I could show them my inbox and a lot of the public comments. Yeah, and if I showed them that, they would realize why it's so useful. That's a fantastic comment. Thank you, Zatzat in the but for that donation. Always appreciate you coming to these live streams. And you know what? I have actually, based off your last previous comments on the last live stream, I actually did send out some DMs to AP AP. I haven't DM'd David Wood, just to see if they'll be interested in doing a collaboration, which I think would be quite fun. So we'll see. And on top of that, I have also been in talks with some other YouTubers and people in the political space to do some collaborations during these live streams. So hopefully have them on and have a fun discussion around what they're interested in. Okay, let's do what did L say? Q&I. Yeah, let's do a Q&I. Post your questions and yeah, we'll just go through them as the final segment. Feel free to ask anything about what we've just discussed, or anything around the channel, or even other previous topics. Happy to go through them. Let me have a quick look at some that's been already asked. Let's see. No, that's a good question. If I'm being very honest with everyone here, you know, there's this whole... We like to use a lot of labels. We call it radical Islam, we call it Islamism, we call it... What is it? Islamic extremism. There's a number of names that we call it. But I think at the end of the day, it's just Islam. I think we're playing games with these labels. In reality, I think there's only one name for all of it, and it's called Islam. I think part of it actually comes from political correctness, because obviously, like, a lot of people, they can't straight up come out and say, especially if they hold positions in government, they can't come out and say, oh, Islam is a problem. Very few do. I think that Reform member, Sarah, perhaps, even the way she said it was primarily around just the burqa. But you can't say that without it becoming a scandal, which is why they generally say Islamism or Islamist or radical Islam. Even George W. Bush, I'm pretty sure even he, during the Iraq war, still could not say Islam. He would call it radical Islam or something like that. And I think even he was like, Islam is actually a religion of peace. And that's the point I always make. Like, okay, if it is a religion of peace, then wouldn't radical Islam be extremely peaceful? Like, why isn't it? If it's a peaceful religion, the radical version of it, or the extreme version of it, should be radically peaceful or extremely peaceful. Like, you should be just a bunch of hippies dancing around in a circle, you know, singing Kumbaya or something, not doing whatever they're doing now. So to answer your question, I think there's just one thing, and it's called Islam. There's nothing else. And if I go back to how I was raised and where I grew up, that distinction never existed. It was just Islam. Like, we did not have a Islamism or anything like that. And even when people try to make that argument of, oh, maybe that guy's a bit more extreme, or maybe he's a bit more radical, they'd be like, oh, but he's following the Sunnah a bit closely. He's trying to emulate the Prophet a bit closely. How could you say that's not Islam? And that argument immediately got shut down. So that's how I would answer your question. Okay, let's have a look at some other question. L, can you talk about Darul Harb and Darul Islam? Yeah, the abode of war and the abode of Islam. This is an interesting one. I think I have actually done a number of videos on this one. But in essence, it's not a crazy concept. So in Islam, the world is essentially split into two parts. The abode of Islam, which is where Islam currently exists and where Islam is the dominant culture or the religion that's practiced, and most people are Muslim, and they're at the top of the hierarchy, I guess. And the rest of the people who live in these lands, they either pay the jizya, which is what Zat said before, which is like a tax on second-class non-Muslims, or the others have converted. But that's how the abode of Islam should ideally exist in their worldview. Now, conversely, the abode of war, these are the lands that have not yet been conquered by Islam. Under this doctrine, those lands need to be conquered and brought into the abode of Islam, because the ultimate goal is obviously domination entirely. Let me try. I'll try to bring my screen back up. Let's see. In images like this one, I feel like, okay, this is a good one. Yeah, in images like this one, obviously Islam started here, and they truly did believe in this concept of the abode of war and the abode of Islam, and they've essentially spread out from right here to literally every single place they could, and ruled over Spain for a significant amount of time as well, until the Reconquista pushed them out. And they would have pushed through even more if it weren't for the Crusades and other wars that stopped them in their tracks. And this is where they've ended up. But to answer your question, that is a doctrine of Islam that is perhaps not discussed as much. And I think you should pay attention to this, because it explains what ultimate goals are. Because it's not I feel like, unlike a lot of other religions, perhaps even more so the Eastern religions, it is a religion that just needs to spread, primarily through conquest. Obviously, there have been a lot of cases where it did in fact spread through trade, just like a number of other religions. But in this case, I think where that does not happen, where their goal is to spread it through conquest. And even during Muhammad's time, he actually sent a number of letters to other kings and leaders around him, asking them to, well, not asking, essentially telling them, you either convert to Islam or we will invade. Let me see who he actually sent these letters to. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, so the Byzantine Emperor, Emperor of the Sassanid Persian Empire, the Christian king of Abyssinia, the ruler of Egypt. I can't actually say this, but again, another Byzantine, part of the Byzantine Empire, the rulers of Oman. And yeah, he gave them two choices. Either you accept it or you get invaded. And he was unfortunately successful or his successors were successful in conquering, let me see, pretty much all of these. So, and that's where the abode of war versus the abode of Islam comes into play. And I hope that answered your question. Let's see. Might have missed some other questions here. Megan, thanks for joining in. I like your name, Phoenix. Yeah, I've got a number of Canadian viewers, and I actually quite enjoy talking about Canada as well because I feel like it mirrors Australia quite closely. It's like if you've got to rank the UK, Canada, and Australia, I feel like you always see things happening in the UK first, then Canada, and then Australia. So you can always prepare yourself for what's about to come, and it never really is a surprise. Let's see. Let's see. Not too many questions today, unlike last time. Oh, sorry. I missed that one, Fizzy. Yeah, just me, I would say, you know what? When my channel blew up, it was by talking about something I was passionate about. It was talking about something that I was, this is my lived experience. Every video I make, all the commentary, everything around it is about things that I know impact me, impact a lot of other people. And when it comes to these three countries, I feel like that, they mirror each other. So, and that's something I'm very passionate about because the changes you see in these three countries, you see it in real time. It's around you. It's tangible. You can see and touch and feel and smell these changes. And when it comes to Islam, that was unfortunately what I was born into. I know what the end result is. I know how much people suffer in silence, and I know the impact that has on things like freedom of expression. The freedoms and the values that we as in Western countries take for granted, and I think that's the advice I would have. Like, speak about things you're passionate about, and ensure that there's a lot of quality behind it. That's the advice I would have. Hope that helped. Let's see. But look, I think we have hit essentially our... I think my live streams have generally been around 2 hours. But I think we've discussed some really cool topics today. And I'll try to wrap up now. But yeah, in the future, I'll be trying to do these mainly around this time on Sundays, Australia time. So I think it will still be Saturday in the US and Canada. However, as always, please feel free to send me any questions you have in advance. Feel free to tag me on X if you wanted me to have a look at any news stories or tweets, anything like that. You can always join my Discord channel. I'm quite active on there, and I'm just chatting away like here. So and in real time. So now to answer that question as the last one, yeah, I do have a lot of viewers from Europe. I think my viewership is primarily America, Europe, and Australia. In Europe, I do get primarily would be the UK, but then again, I also do have places like Germany and France looking at it, and some of the random countries that I would have never even thought. So that's always really exciting. And I think YouTube now has auto dubbing as well, so hopefully that also helps reach more people and automatically dub and translate the videos into something they understand. Yeah, Jess, it's crazy. Obviously, I'm also new to live streaming. This one's only my 4th, and it's crazy how quickly time goes. And And I only really even had 2 segments, which was essentially 2 separate issues. And yeah, time just goes really, really fast. Last time I wanted to do something really fun and sort of start up Marvel Rivals and have a little bit of fun and just chill out while answering questions and talking to my viewers. But I think there was a technical issue behind that, so I couldn't do that. But like I said, as always, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I'm always really happy to see people join these live streams. It's very different to the normal faceless videos where I can just converse with everyone directly, answer your questions, and talk about things that we all are concerned about. And where we see changes around us happening in real time. So thanks a lot for that. Thank you again for all your support. I'll hopefully put out a new video in a couple of days. This one will be really good. Once again, thank you very much. And hopefully I'll see everyone again next week at the same time on Sunday. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.